Let me tell you, I am very excited for today's video, and also a little embarrassed, as showing off my Metroid collection is not exactly, or wasn't exactly at the top of my head when I had the idea to do these monthly showcase videos, but thanks to this comment from my good friend Talon Obscure, that's what we're talking about today. And I say I'm embarrassed because really Metroid is kind of one of the first, if not the first, reason I kind of started collecting video games in the first place. Of course, I started getting more interested in retro media towards the latter end of my high school years. I got my old GameCube back. I was exploring a lot of the old Nintendo franchises that I had never played in my earlier years, and one of those was the Metroid series. And for a time, Metroid was like my favorite game ever of all time. I mean, I know I make the joke that I'm like a big Pokemon nerd, and that's definitely true, but there was a time where there was nothing I wanted to play more than Metroid. And because of that, the Metroid series was one of the first series that says, hey, I want to get all the games for this collection. This is like, you know, I love this so much, I want to play all these games, I want to own all these games. And the Metroid series was like the first, like, hey, this is the set I'm going to go out of my way to complete. And depending on what you consider a complete Metroid collection, I have it, or maybe I'm missing a few pieces. Now for me, I do like to own all the different variations of things as much as I can, but at the bottom level, I do at least own every game in the series that's ever been released. So, again, you know, however you want to determine a complete collection, that's totally up to you. I'm just here to show you what I have. And I'm pretty excited about it. So I think without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump right in with, of course, the one and only Metroid on NES, the game that started it all. Revolutionary for the time, absolutely. I guess you could make the argument this is like the first, like, well, obviously the first Metroidvania, but like the first, like, open world even kind of game. That's probably not 100% true, but certainly one that hit the masses. And as a big deal as this game was back in the day, I don't have a lot of nice things to say about NES Metroid, I'll be perfectly honest. It has not aged well, but as you can see here, I have a complete in-box copy of the first release of the game, and then they got a second release later on down the line with what people call this the yellow label. So yeah, I got both of these. Like this one, I like the label on this one a lot better. I don't know, it's just super cool looking. But yeah, not the greatest game in the series by a long shot, but it had to start somewhere. And you know, I say that I actually go back and play this like on a weirdly frequent basis, never with the intent of like beating the game or anything like that, but there is something fun about turning on the original Metroid in one of its various ports and just going through it, exploring, checking out all the different areas and all that kind of good stuff. So much so that at the very least, I have Brinstar fairly well memorized at this point. But yeah, not too much else to say. I did get this complete in-box copy, actually, as I gotta tell some of my stories and my memories. I was working at a game exchange when this came in, and I believe, if I remember correctly, we tested the cartridge that came in with this, and it did not work. But the manager was like, you know what, I'll buy it off of the guy, and we'll make something work with it. Alright, sure, makes sense, it's complete in box. At the time, their system didn't differentiate between loose games and complete in box games, so no matter what, we were selling the game for like 20 bucks at the time. And so, you know, my manager completes the trade-in, and then he takes this, immediately walks around the other side of the counter, and he goes, Phelan, I'm buying you this, because I know you're a big Metroid fan, and I think you'd appreciate this. I think I like recently bought him a birthday gift or something, and he wanted to return the favor. So he's like, yeah, we're pretty sure the cartridge doesn't work, but you have a box and manual for Metroid. I'm sure you won't have a problem finding a cartridge maybe at home to replace. So yeah, you know, that's how I got this complete in box. It was a kind gesture from a friend. This is actually the cartridge the guy traded it in with, the one that we were pretty sure doesn't work. I just kind of left it in there because I have the yellow label that doesn't really go with this box, you know, so... I'm cool to have it as a collector's piece, and, you know, maybe one of these days if I find, like, just loose Metroid out in the wild and can confirm that it works, you know, maybe I'll do the swapsies, but I think for now I'm cool with having it as a collector's piece. And by the way, I apologize if you hear any crinkling. I do have the cartridges protected with these special covers. Just, you know, you gotta keep your cartridge games healthy. You know what I'm saying? These things can kind of go the way of the wind sometimes. They are pretty old. So do what you can. Keep your boxes and cartridges healthy. But yeah, so we'll move right along. I actually got this in a little protective case. Let me get this out. This is Metroid 2, Return of Samus on the Game Boy. Good lord, they make these things impossible to open. So you want to talk about keeping your cartridges protected? Plastic shell, and I got this in a protective wrapper. I'm keeping my game safe, baby, but... Yeah, Metroid 2, Return of Samus, the sequel to the NES game, developed for the Game Boy, as Gunpei Yokoi was part of the team that developed Metroid, but also Gunpei Yokoi being the creator of the Game Boy. I'm sure he's like, yeah, let's take our game and put it on, you know, the system that we made. And yeah, it makes sense. Much like the original Metroid, I don't really have a ton to say about this one. This is a game that I've really only sampled here and there. You know, I bought the game, plugged it in, made sure it worked. I was like, okay, cool. All this kind of other stuff. But it was never one that, like, I could really get into. The limited scope, or rather the limited technology on the Game Boy, I think really hurt the scope of this game. And it kind of suffers from a lot of the same problems that the NES game did. I'm perfectly fine playing the remake, if you ask me personally. But you gotta have it for the Metroid collection, and, you know, as I was gathering these games, I realized that there's actually not a ton of them that I haven't beat. I think it's like this one, the NES Metroid, and then like one more, which we'll get into later. And so, you know, I'm playing through a lot of my backlog this year, as you've probably seen through some of my recent live streams. So I figured sooner rather than later, I'll be cutting through some of these Metroid games that I haven't beaten, but, yeah, not too much about not too much to say about this one. I bought it for the Metroid collection, and it's not one that gets a ringing endorsement from me, but it is one of the more ambitious games for the Game Boy. Not that I think about it, but yeah, not too much to say on this one. All right, now this is the big one. I've got Super Metroid. I've got 2 copies of Super Metroid. I love Super Metroid. I think if you've been on the Nintendo, you know, in the Nintendo ecosystem on the internet in the past, even just couple years, but, you know, the longer you've been on, the more likely you've probably heard Super Metroid is unequivocally one of the best games ever made. Right? I mean, it certainly ranks extremely highly in some of the games that I've ever played. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. I mean, this game is just incredible. Now, I have 2 copies here. This is the original Black Label, and this is a complete in box greatest hits. That's why I'm okay. I usually don't like to have duplicates, and I especially really don't show off any duplicates in the collection videos, but, you know, considering that it's complete in box, like, greatest hits versus, like, a Black Label, it's just like, I can't really take the Black Label cartridge and put it in here, you know what I'm saying? Like, that just doesn't work, so, you know. But, yeah, I bought this copy first for my Metroid collection. I think back when I bought it, I want to say I paid like 35 bucks for it. I was pretty lucky to get most of my collection before COVID, thankfully, but then that's when, like, the prices on everything skyrocketed. So if I remember correctly, I think I got this for like 35 bucks or something, and that's kind of all I was willing to do, or all I was expecting to be able to do for this game. Considering its cult following and just how beloved this game is, I thought a complete box copy was not possible. But as you can see, it's not Black Label, right? Which, you know, for some people is a deal breaker. And I understand. For me, I don't really care. You know, I have Super Metroid in the box. I could care less if it's got this golden ribbon at the top. I could care less if, you know, like, it doesn't matter. This is still Super Metroid in a box from the 90s. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's all I care about. But yeah, I was out game hunting one day. We had a local mom and pop shop here in town, which unfortunately is no longer in business. But they've had, you know, they had this copy of Super Metroid in their glass case. And if I remember correctly, I think it was there for a while, right? Like, back before I was, like, super into collecting. I remember going in there and seeing this every now and again. And so I went game collecting, or I went game hunting one day, and I went into that store, and, you know, I was looking around at a whole bunch of stuff. I ended up not getting anything. But every time, the more and more I got into Metroid, every time I'd walk in there and I'd see this, I'm like, man, I really want that. And they were selling it for 80 bucks at the time. I think that was after a price drop. I think the first time I saw it, it was like 100 something. I don't fully remember, but, you know, on the day I went in there, it was like 80 bucks or something. And I walked out, and I didn't buy anything, because I was a bit limited on how much money I had at the time. And I got in my car, I started the car, and I said, it's only 80 bucks. What am I doing? Like, that is like a grail item right there. To have Super Metroid complete in box. They're only selling it for 80 bucks. Now I'm gonna be like eating ice soup, you know, for the rest of the week. But, you know, sometimes that's worth it. And I'm not saying to be frivolous with your cash, because obviously that's not a good thing to do. I'm not giving any kind of financial advice here. But every now and again you come across a deal that's pretty good, and it's just like, well, you know, I get paid at the end of the week, you know. Sometimes you gotta chase those. And, yeah, I mean, like I said, prices on this have gone up exponentially, and for one of the greatest games ever made, like, I'm not even talking, like, Metroid games, I'm seriously talking about, like, one of the greatest games of all time, complete in box right here in my collection. Yeah, I want that. You know, I gotta be perfectly honest. Another reason why I was a little excited to make this video is actually it's gonna be a little bit easier, probably a little bit shorter than the Mega Man video, as, you know, Mega Man's multi-platform. They had a ton of games over a ton of different systems. It gave me a lot of ground to talk about. Metroid is not exactly one of those franchises. It skipped over the Nintendo 64 entirely. There was nothing on Nintendo's first 3D system. So we jumped from the Super Nintendo all the way up to the 6th generation of systems. And we're going to start with Game Boy Advance here. Because I also don't have a ton of, like, miscellaneous Metroid stuff. There isn't really, like, a ton of Metroid merch that you can kind of get to create a miscellaneous section. And one of the few things that I would consider that kind of falls in line here, so we're just going to go through that. So I have all 3 GBA games released for the series. Metroid Fusion, right here. Metroid Zero Mission, and then the NES port, or rather the GBA port of the NES game here on Game Boy Advance. All pretty fantastic games across the board. You know, I learned this from the Mega Man video. I'm not going to be able to show these on camera very well because they're very tiny, so I'll have a picture. But, all pretty good games across the board. I love Metroid Fusion. Now, I'll have to be honest, most of these games I experienced for the first time on, like, the Wii U Virtual Console, or, you know, things of that nature. That's definitely how it was for Metroid Fusion for me. And I know Metroid Fusion can be pretty hit or miss for a lot of people. For me personally, I think it's a fantastic game. You know, it kind of comes away from that non-linearity a little bit, which is unfortunate. That's kind of the defining feature of Metroid games for myself and for a lot of people. But I think it does it in a way that it's, like, not too alienating to that crowd, right? It's like, yeah, you're a little bit railroaded. Yeah, you're told where to go, but it's like, well, areas you've previously been to, you can go back to at pretty much any time. There's, like, maybe 1 or 2 occasions where they kind of gatekeep you, but for the most part, you can go back to any other location whenever you want. And there's also a handful of secrets, right? I think the infamous one being, like, the Shine Spark section You know, when the entirety of like the space station is like shut down, and it's basically designed in such a way for you to go exactly through this path, but clever players are able to use like secret techniques like the shine spark to make a completely different path, and the developers even thought of that, and they were like, hey, here's an Easter egg if you did that, which I think is really cool. So I think they were really thoughtful about trying to help players that maybe weren't used to non-linearity while still kind of allowing some of that freedom. Not too much to say about the GBA port of the NES game. It's still the NES game, but on GBA, this is how I played it for the first time. And, you know, I got that for... That was actually... That was actually one of the first Metroid games I'd ever played, actually, was the NES game on GBA. I remember I was a big fan of Super Smash Bros. Melee back then, and the cool thing about that game is realizing that it was a whole bunch of Nintendo characters. I'm like, oh, okay, well, you know, I love Mario, I love Kirby, I love Pokemon. Let me check out, you know, these other games. And so when we went to a game exchange, I saw, you know, Metroid, and I was like, you know, ding 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 ding. I made the connection. I was like, oh, that's the game Samus is from. Let's get that. Let's play that. And not great, but there was something charming about it to me, even as a kid. You know, like a kid in like the early 2000s. You know, and I don't know. I definitely did not enjoy it a whole bunch back then either. But there was something charming about it, and maybe that's why I find myself just kind of going through that first section of the game as many times as I do. Maybe that has something to do with that. Real quick before I get to Metroid Zero Mission, here's that other bit of what the only like miscellaneous thing that I really have outside of the amiibo, which we'll get to that at the end. Yeah, I've got the official Nintendo Player's Guide for Metroid Fusion. Now, I bought this like after I beat the game on the Wii U Virtual Console. I really only bought it as a collector's piece. I believe... I don't remember what store I got this at, actually. I think I went to like some city or some town about an hour out and happened to see this and be like, okay, you know, guidebooks are nice. They kind of got a nice aesthetic to them. And I love Metroid, so let's go ahead and get this one. But yeah, not too much to say about it. I did not use this to beat the game, though I'm sure it would be handy. Well, with that little detour out of the way, like I said, the last game on the GBA to talk about is Metroid Zero Mission. This is another one that I haven't beaten. This is a complete remake of the NES game, and if you want to play Metroid 1, if you absolutely have to play Metroid 1, please play it this way. Now, this is one of the few Metroid games that I haven't beaten. I believe by the time I got to this, I believe I owned this game on the GBA several years before we got the Wii U, when I was like exploring Metroid games for the first time. I never did get around to playing it because I could not for the life of me beat Metroid Fusion on GBA. Again, wasn't until years later it came out on Wii U Virtual Console that I was able to beat it. And then I just never got around to this one after beating Fusion for whatever reason. I think I was just kind of wanting to move on to the other games. I was like, okay, well, it's Metroid 1. I know Metroid 1. I know how this works. You know, I don't really need to jump right into this one. You know what? Actually, now that I think about it, it might have been around the time that the Metroid 2 remake was coming out, now that I think about it. And I was full steam ahead for that game, because it was like the first new Metroid game we had gotten in a very long time. We'll get to that in a minute. But okay, that does it for the Game Boy Advance. Now it's time to move on to the greatest console of all time, the Nintendo GameCube. Yes, I am going to say that every single time I do one of these collection videos. If I have a game on the GameCube, I am going to announce it to you as the best system of all time. I'm sorry, I just can't, I don't make the rules, I just follow them, okay? And, you know, only 2 games released, but I have 3 to show you. So, got Metroid Prime. This is arguably my favorite game on the system. It's really between this and Smash Bros. Melee. If I'm in a multiplayer mood, Melee is the best game. If I'm in a single player mood, this is the best game. That's just how it is. But Metroid Prime, man, what an incredible game. You know, it's probably a hot take, I guess, I don't really know, but I actually consider this to be my favorite in the Metroid series just in general. Yes, even over Super Metroid. And it could be a little bit of nostalgia, because this is technically the first Metroid game I ever played, way back on GameCube. Like the year it came out, my dad bought this for himself, right? So he came home one day with Metroid Prime and with The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. Wind Waker was for me and for my brother and for my sister. This game was for him. He did not like it very much. He played like the first like hour or two and was like, it's not for me. But let us play it anyway. Now, we couldn't get into it at the time. We were very young and we weren't very good at this game. We weren't even very good at Zelda, to be perfectly honest. Both of those games were a little too complex for us at the time. So, I didn't get to enjoy it then, but, you know, as I came to love the Metroid series more and more, thanks to, you know, being exposed to Samus through, like, Super Smash Brothers, and, ironically enough, Some Call Me Johnny, shoutouts to Some Call Me Johnny, you know, as I came to explore the Metroid series more and more because of stuff like that, I went back to this game, and I just could not get my hands off the controller. I could not pry my eyes away from the TV. This game was just fantastic. It took the beautiful open world, non-linearity, Metroidvania type thing, and I think effortlessly brought it to 3D. I think it's like the perfect encapsulation of what Super accomplished on the Super Nintendo, but in 3D. And, you know, at the time, I think the first-person perspective was terrifying for Metroid fans at the time, and I understand why that might have been the case, what with Halo, and, you know, just recently hitting the scene and all that kind of good stuff, you know, people worrying that the series was going to go that direction, but it didn't at all, you know. You have this large open world to discover, it's beautiful, there are secrets everywhere, there are puzzles to solve, you know, power-ups that you can get with stuff that you get later on in the game, so you have reason to come back and explore old areas and all that kind of good stuff. Just a fantastic game. Easily one of the best, like, ever. And alongside that, I also have this copy of Metroid Prime that comes with a bonus disc that had, like, a demo for the sequel, Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. This was packaged in with a Metroid Prime themed GameCube bundle. It wasn't anything super special, it just was like a silver GameCube with like the face jewel of the system that just said like Metroid Prime. The box is really cool though. I'll put some pictures on screen. I actually, to be perfectly honest with you, I actually didn't know about this console bundle until very recently, until my friend Dom told me about it. But yeah, this was the pack-in for that console bundle. So you got Metroid Prime, and you also got a bonus disc with Prime 2 Echoes, and I think, it doesn't say on here, but I think that bonus disc also had demos for other games. I could be wrong about that, but it was more than just the Prime 2 demo, I know that for certain. So it might have been like developer stuff from the first game. Truthfully, it's been a long time since I booted this up. I don't remember. But yeah, this is what was bundled with that console, and you know, I kind of wish I had the box for that console, as I'm telling you. I'm putting the pictures on screen. Look at this. This is just gorgeous. I love this. But still cool to have nonetheless. You know, you got some interesting stuff. The Prime 2 demo is quite different than what, you know, we got. There are some similarities, of course, but there are enough differences to make that demo kind of an interesting footnote in Metroid history before we get to, you know, of course, Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. Now, this is the last game in the series history that I have not beaten. So that's NES, Metroid 2, Zero Mission, and this game. It's the only 4 games that I haven't beaten. And if I remember correctly, I think this was actually like the first game that I tried to play when I was like exploring the Metroid series, you know, after kind of rediscovering it in my middle school years. This was the first game I managed to get a hold of. And there are things I love about this game, like it has like the whole light versus dark thing. I know that's a very common trope in like video games or fiction in general, but I love it. You know, I love Kingdom Hearts for the same reason. Like the whole light versus dark thing is just very amusing to me. I don't know, it's a trope that is absolutely overused, but I love it and I don't care. So this game kind of caught my attention for that way. I was like, oh, I got the dark beam, and I got the light beam, and you know, we're kind of balancing the two forces or whatever. But I do think that this game kind of falters in a lot of situations where I think Prime 1 just absolutely soared. And I think, like, being a follow-up to Prime 1 already is kind of hard enough as it is. And, you know, you make a few missteps along the way, it kind of hurts the package overall. And I think that's partially why I never ended up beating this game. Well, I suppose the other reason was looking for the Sky Temple keys, which, yeah, that's where I stopped. I got all the way up to that part, which is like the very end of the game, and I stopped, so. Gonna have to come back to this one at some point. Like I said, that's only 4 games that I haven't beaten, so I might as well just power through them and say that, yes, I've beaten all the Metroid games. And, you know, this one's not that bad, but I do think Prime 1 and even Prime 3 is a little bit better than this, but still a good time. And this has multiplayer, but, like, okay, it's kind of whatever. You know, another thing I love about the Metroid series is that it kind of has a healthy balance of great console games and great handheld games. And it's kind of weird to think about, because there are some franchises, Nintendo or otherwise, that do really well on home console, but maybe not so well on handhelds, or vice versa. But Metroid is pretty consistent in quality across the board on both the handheld and the home console games. I've always appreciated that about the franchise. So, as we move into the Nintendo DS, you know, I got another console bundle here for you. So I got the Nintendo DS. This is complete in box. Nintendo DS with the Metroid Prime Hunters First Hunt edition. So it was like a demo for Metroid Prime Hunters that came with this bundle. There's nothing special about the DS. It's just a silver DS, which actually, it's not even in the box. I have it right here. This is it. It's just a silver Nintendo DS. Nothing special about it. No Metroid, anything. Just a silver DS. I have this sitting out because I actually just recently I got this. I sent this off to a guy to hard mod it for capture, so I could plug in this USB-C port into my computer and capture footage off it. That's how I've been doing my Pokemon streams, by the way. Check me out. But yeah, just a cool console bundle. The DS, I don't know, it's so interesting to me that, like, Metroid Prime Hunters practically only exists to prove that the Nintendo DS could do 3D graphics. It's not the only game that did that, obviously. I think Mario 64 DS was also made to prove that the DS could do 3D graphics. And this was kind of a way to get that in people's hands, like, pretty early. Like, oh, play a demo of this 3D Metroid game. We're putting Metroid Prime on Nintendo DS. And I have the cartridge for that right here. Metroid Prime Hunters, First Hunt. It's a demo, like I said, it's a demo for Hunters. You just go through, like, a quick shooting gallery, and then that's kind of about it. There's not really much to it. It's fine, you know, again, it's just a demo, right? And a lot of times back in the day, you could find this for like $1. Like, people were not at all chomping at the bit to get this. At least like when I was like filling out my Metroid collection. I'm pretty sure that's how I got. I think I paid like $1 for this. So be that as it may. But Metroid did get a few games on the Nintendo DS. I got Metroid Prime Pinball and Metroid Prime Hunters. Prime Pinball, to my knowledge, I think is like the only spin-off that the series has ever had. I'm sure some people would like to debate Metroid Prime Federation Force. Sure, we can have that debate, but that game's canon. Like, it's canon, so I'm not sure you can call it a spin-off if it's canon. Either way, we'll get to that. But yeah, Metroid Prime Pinball, I have not played this. I do love pinball. I consider myself a pretty big pinball fan. But I haven't popped this one in yet. You know, it's pinball. I could pop this in, get it done in like a couple hours, or if even that, and just call it a day, you know? And, you know, it's kind of funny that they take this and they're just like, yeah, this is Metroid Prime. Like, straight up, this is Metroid Prime. It has all the same bosses, has all the same locations as Metroid Prime on the GameCube, just in the form of pinball. Which I think is really funny. Metroid Prime Hunters, though, is kind of the game people go to the most on the Nintendo DS for when it comes to Metroid. And a large reason for that is not because of the game's single player or any high quality thing from that. For once, it's actually for multiplayer. And Metroid doesn't do a lot of multiplayer. In fact, this and Prime 2 Echoes is the only time Metroid's had multiplayer. Aside from Federation Force, we'll get to that. But yeah, anytime you hear anybody talk about this game, it's for the online multiplayer, because you're controlling, it's a first-person shooter game, and you're controlling your cursor, your aiming reticle with the touchscreen, and as hand-cramping as that control style is, anybody that's played Kid Icarus Uprising knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's the same control scheme. As hand-cramping as it is highly accurate for, like, moving cursors and stuff. I genuinely remember seeing, like, montage videos back in the day of people, like, getting like, insane snipes with, like, the Spartan laser-esque weapon in this game. It's like, kind of like it's like the sniper rifle kind of thing. Yeah, there were people that would play that character and just boom! Like, there were actual montages for this, like Halo kind of style montages for this back in the day, which is just so funny to me. The few times I hopped on to play the online multiplayer, I got absolutely wasted. I'm terrible at first-person shooters as it is, and yeah, I was not very good at this. But I did play the single player, I did beat this game. It's okay. It's nothing earth-shattering, but I think for, you know, what they had on the system and kind of the concept they were going for, I think it's kind of neat. It has a bunch of really cool weapons. It's got all these different bounty hunters that are, like, hunting you as the game progresses, so you can land on one planet, and then all of a sudden you're under attack from one of the hunters, and then, you know, you gotta beat them and take them out in combat and all that kind of good stuff. You gotta get all their weapons and stuff like that. It's kind of cool. I certainly wouldn't play this over, like, Fusion or Zero Mission or any of the other Prime games for that matter, but still a good time. If you have it and you can, you know, play the game for a long enough time without your hands hurting, I'd say go for it. It's a good time. And now we come to the Nintendo Wii, where unfortunately this is kind of where the death of Metroid happens. Not the death, but like this extremely long hiatus of Metroid games that we had been on before we got Metroid 2. Kind of started here, but not with these first few games. Of course, the capper to the Metroid Prime trilogy was released on the Nintendo Wii, Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. And this makes sense, right? You have the Wii Remote, you can point it around, you can use it to control the cursor on the screen. Very intuitive for first-person shooters, or first-person games just in general. Very intuitive for that kind of stuff. Motion controls, so you can, you know, you got all that stuff, and it kind of makes sense for a first-person game like this. And, you know, I know a lot of people are annoyed with motion controls in the modern era. Like, I know, hell, even back when the Wii was the system to own, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to waggle, I don't want to, you know, do this or that. Say what you will about motion controls, I think they're neat. I don't know, I've always kind of enjoyed these weird gimmick things that Nintendo has done, and I think the Wii got a bad rap. And, you know, it's not entirely undeserved, considering all the shovelware on the system that gave waggle controls a bad name for itself, or just poor-produced games in general. But, you know, Nintendo, I think, anytime that they worked with the motion controls for their games, it's just always been to a benefit, I think, right? So you got things like, of course, you're moving around your reticle with the cursor on the screen. You've got, like, motion controls to, like, rip panels off of walls and, you know, do all this kind of interactive stuff. And in my opinion, it's all pretty non-intrusive. I think it all works really well, and I think it helps kind of increase the atmosphere of the game, or make it more, can help make the game, like, more immersive and stuff like that. In my opinion, I know that's an unpopular opinion, but yeah, I don't know, I really like Metroid Prime 3. It is a bit more hand-holdy than some other games in the franchise, probably even more than Zero Mission, or, I'm sorry, Fusion and Zero Mission. But still a good game all around. It definitely puts more of an emphasis on like shooting things. There's like a lot of moments in the game where it's just like you gotta defeat all the enemies or like whatever, but I think they do a good job of mixing it up, especially with like the boss fights. It's like, okay, well now you gotta take advantage of like the Wii, so it's like you gotta aim over here, you gotta aim over here, you gotta use this power up, you gotta use that, and I don't know, I've always really enjoyed it, and I think it's a great game, personally speaking, despite, you know, people don't like motion controls. I like motion controls. I like this game. And of course, if you didn't want to have to play all 3 Metroid Prime games between 2 different systems, we also have Metroid Prime Trilogy. This got 2 releases. It's got the Steelbook release and just a standard plastic case release. I got this one first because this one's cheaper and easier to find. And then I found this one at a local game store. They were selling it for like 80 bucks a couple years ago. Really shady store. They're no longer in business, which normally I like lament mom and pop video game stores going out of business, but that one was kind of shady, to be perfectly honest with you, so probably for the better. But yeah, snagged this for 80 bucks. It doesn't have a slip cover. There's like a slip cover that goes over this, very similar to the Halo 2 collector's edition. Funnily enough, if y'all happen to remember what that looks like, but, you know, if the only thing I'm missing from a Metroid Prime Trilogy, like, Steelbook Collector's Edition is the slipcover, I'm okay with that. It's, you know, for some people that's probably not complete. You're probably right, technically speaking, but I don't care. I have the Steelbook, and I have the game. With the manual and everything, and it still looks beautiful on my shelf, so I'm cool with it. So yeah, this is what I'm talking about. It's just like, I'm into collecting variants if I can, but if I didn't have this one, or if I didn't have this one, like, I'm chilling, because it's Metroid Prime Trilogy. Like, come on. You have the best Metroid game ever made, Metroid Prime, re-released for the Wii, with the more accurate motion controls, which, you know, some people like, some people don't like. I get it, right? Like, I personally, like, I know a lot of people that weren't, like, a fan of, like, the GameCube control scheme for, like, the first 2 Prime games. I didn't have a problem with it personally, but either way, the motion controls are quite accurate, of course. And, you know, it's just nice to be able to have all 3 games on one system. Of course, nowadays, you know, having all 3 games on one system being an outdated Nintendo Wii is a little unfortunate. Despite the fact that, like, I mean, Wii's are pretty easy to find. I mean, you look under your couch cushions and you probably have one, but, yeah, so there's this, and of course, if you have a Wii U, you can download this digitally. It's a great collection, right? If you just want an easy way to play all 3 games off the same system with a pretty good control scheme, Metroid Prime Trilogy. The problem is, you need the game, which is fetching pretty high prices, as Metroid Prime Trilogy just in general had a pretty short print run, or you need a Wii U, and then, oh, actually, they shut down the Wii U eShop, didn't they? You can't even get that anymore. That sucks. Digital media sucks, man. Okay, well, this is the only way you have, then, is to get a Wii, and to buy this game that is going up in price exponentially. So, yeah, can we get a re-release for this, please, or something? Come on. Anyway, great collection. If you have a Wii and you're able to snag this one, do it. Absolutely do it. And the final game released for the Wii for the Metroid series is Metroid Other M. I have a weird relationship with this game. It is universally panned in the Metroid fandom and the Metroid series. Many people consider this to be one of the worst games in the series, and I can't say I blame them for that. However, like I said, I have a complicated relationship with this one, as this game is actually, like, what got me into the series. Because, again, to kind of, like, quickly go over my history with the franchise, I knew of it from, like, Smash Brothers, and I had tried playing older Metroid games. You know, Metroid Prime when my dad bought it when I was really young, or the NES game on GBA. I tried playing the Metroid series, but as a kid, I just could not get into it. I couldn't understand it. It was just not for me. Later on, as I get into middle school, I start watching YouTube a whole bunch. Actually, weirdly enough, the channel that you're watching this on right now is my very first YouTube channel from middle school that is I'm still choosing to operate off of for whatever reason. But anyway, you know, I got into YouTube, I was watching a bunch of videos, and I discovered a content creator named Some Call Me Johnny. Sure, some of y'all have probably heard of him. I still watch his stuff to this day. He's a fantastic content creator. But he had a series of Metroid videos where he reviewed all the Metroid games, and, you know, I watched those because at the time, Nintendo was hyping up the release of this game, and, you know, as I was a little bit older at this time, I was like, man, this game looks sick. You know, you're playing as Samus, she's like flipping, flying all around, dodging, ducking, and blasting aliens and stuff. I'm like, this game looks freaking cool, man. So I watch all of his videos, you know, out of excitement for this game, and I'm like, I gotta play this Metroid series, and this game comes out. I got it day one, and as somebody that didn't really get into Metroid before playing this game, at the time, I loved it. It was awesome. You were like flipping and flying all around, dodging these attacks, jumping on aliens, and firing charge blasts directly into their cranium. It was awesome. What I didn't realize, having not played any other game in the series, was that this is one of the most linear games, actually the most linear, most hand-holdy, most boring game in the series that completely destroys Samus as a character. In retrospect, I understand that, and I dislike this game for all of those things. However, if it weren't for this game, I probably would not have become the big Metroid fan that I am today, so I do kind of have a soft spot for it for that reason. It's an okay game, not a very good Metroid game. We'll just put it that way. And I think, like, I mean, granted, like, Wii games are, like, pretty cheap these days, but I think this one still, to this day, like, fetches an extremely low price because people just hated this game. And I can't say I blame them. And what's sad about that is that, unfortunately, the absolutely poor critical reception of Metroid Other M kicked us into a drought of Metroid games. If I remember correctly, I believe Metroid Other M came out in like 2010, 2011, something around that time frame. And that was the last Metroid game we had gotten until 2016, when we got Metroid Prime Federation Force on the Nintendo 3DS. Now, if people don't consider Metroid Other M the worst game in the series history, they consider this game to be the worst game in the series history. And admittedly, I think it's a little unfair, but not unjustified. Because, you know, after several years of having no Metroid games, and having the most recent Metroid game being Metroid Other M, a game that Metroid fans absolutely hated, following it up with a game focused on the Galactic Federation with like these chibi robot style type things, not based on exploration, but more focused on co-op and shooting, or being more about like, you know, shooting up aliens and racking up the kill count and stuff like that. That is about as far away from what Metroid fans wanted, especially after so long. And I think there was like some troubled development, like this was supposed to come out like much sooner than it actually did, or something along those lines, or it was supposed to be something else entirely. I remember there were some like some stuff that came out about that at the time. I don't fully remember, but point is, this came out in 2016, several years after Metroid Other M, and it turned out to be more crap that the community did not want. And I do feel a little bit bad for this game. I have played it, I have beat it, I did a co-op run with a buddy of mine, and it is one of the most mind-numbing co-op experiences I've ever played in my life. And, you know, I kind of feel like a dunce, because back when this game was announced, on this very YouTube channel, actually, I made a video telling people to give this game a chance, before it had come out, by the way. I was telling people to give the game a chance because I was like, oh, well, we haven't had a Metroid game in years, we're actually getting like a spin-off, like I think maybe this is Nintendo like trying to feel the waters, trying to try something new, trying to like, you know, I think my argument at the time was like, well, Mario gets a bunch of spin-off games, Zelda gets a bunch of spin-off games, because those are big franchises, big popular franchises, and they want to explore different ways to play them. Metroid has never historically been that, so I think my argument at the time was, oh, well, Nintendo is willing to give Metroid this spin-off experience, a different way to play games in the Metroid universe. You know, maybe this is them really wanting to try to make Metroid as big as Mario and Zelda. And of course, hindsight's always 20/20. That was one of the stupidest arguments I think I've ever made in my life. And this game is okay. It is okay, and really, just really bad timing on that launch. I think, honestly, if you had released this game like after Metroid after Metroid, the Metroid 2 remake, or after like Dread or something like that, I don't think people would have as much of a problem with this game. The biggest problem was that it came out in the middle of a Metroid drought after the last game sucked. And that just did not sit over well with fans at all. And again, I think like other M, I am like a little softer on this game just because I don't like to be... I don't know, they wanted to do something different, and I'm always a big fan of that. It's just the timing was awful, and the game suffered critically for it because of that. And also because it's kind of mediocre. Of course, that's not all we have on the 3DS. I did mention we have Metroid 2, or rather, Metroid Samus Returns. They dropped the 2, but this is a remake of the Game Boy game, Metroid 2, Return of Samus. Man, this was such a weird time. It was nice to see Metroid return to form. This was 2017, I think, right? So yeah, about a year later, you know, we got this in like 2015, 2016. People were not happy about it, and you know, but then a year later, we get a remake of Metroid 2. Makes sense. The only remake Metroid had ever had was Zero Mission on the GBA, which is a remake of the NES game. So it kind of makes sense that you go and, you know, okay, well, we remade Metroid 1, let's remake Metroid 2 now. But it was such a weird time because, like, mere months before this game had come out, a fan recreation of Metroid 2 had also come out. AM2R, another Metroid 2 remake. Very popular. You know, the guy who had worked on that for like over 10 years. Like, I remember hearing about that remake like way back before Metroid Other M had come out, even. Like, that guy was working on this game for a really long time. And unfortunately got the old cease and desist from Nintendo just for this game to come out. And admittedly, you know, I dislike Nintendo and all of their cease and desist on like fan games and stuff like that. I think it's really primitive and dumb, in my opinion. However, a lot of people were much more ready to forgive Nintendo in that one specifically because it's like, well, that's bad timing. You're releasing a Metroid 2 remake, and we're releasing a Metroid 2 remake, and we don't want you to cannibalize sales. So, I guess I could be a little softer on it, but I still think it's stupid. Anyway, this is a good remake. I really enjoyed my time with this one, and to be honest, if you're gonna play Metroid 2, just play this. Like, I don't really... unless you're wanting to, like, experience the Game Boy games specifically, and kind of how that game functioned back then, and all that kind of good stuff, you know, you could go play that, but, like, if you just want to play Metroid 2 for the story, or you just say, like, to just go through the games, just play this. It's so good. Granted, they added a lot of stuff, they took a lot of liberties, because admittedly there's only so much you can do when remaking a Game Boy game, of all things. But I think it's for the better, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, absolutely fantastic game. I love all the Easter eggs that this has. You know, it kind of has allusions to some of the lore that came on later. In like Metroid Fusion, it has Easter eggs to that kind of stuff. It had Easter eggs to Dread, even, I think. Mercury Steam dropped a few Easter eggs on kind of what they planned for Metroid Dread story, which I thought was really cool. And yeah, overall a great game. This is the special edition that came with like a special soundtrack, which, man, let me tell you, when I got this, I had that soundtrack going in my car like for forever. I'm not kidding. Like, that was the only thing I listened to in my car after this came out for a very long while. But yeah, overall a good game. Yeah, not much more to say. It's pretty good. And just like that, we're already pretty much at the end of, you know, all the major Metroid releases, as all we have left is the Nintendo Switch with Metroid Dread and Metroid Prime Remastered. Of course, I've already talked at length about Metroid Prime. It is still to this day my favorite game in the series, and to have it on Switch with like proper dual analog control, like what you might expect from a modern first-person shooter, is just, it's amazing. It's like remastered. It looks great for the system. I was actually really worried about this one for a minute because it came out digitally first, right? So when they announced the game, they're like, hey, we're gonna drop it on this day digitally, and then the physical copy will be available like 2 weeks or a month later, which had me a little concerned, especially because when the physical drop came around, it was limited. Almost instantly, all the GameStops and all the game stores where I live were out of stock on this, like instantly. And I was terrified. I was like, there's no way I'm actually going to miss a remaster of one of my favorite games of all time for one of the best-selling systems of all time. And this is not going to be the game that eludes me for my collection. I refuse. Now, luckily, I was patient. I waited. And eventually GameStop did get a restock, and I managed to get it on that restock. Thank God. But yeah, a fantastic game. Of course, I already told you I love Metroid Prime. It's like one of my favorite games of all time. And again, it looks fantastic on the Switch. It's got dual analog control if you prefer that, or if you prefer the old control scheme, you can play it that way too. I think I actually even went as so far as to plug in a GameCube controller and to just play it that way, just with the better graphics, because I'm a psychopath like that. And of course, the most recent original game in the series, Metroid Dread. That's right, Metroid Dread Revived. I believe, man, it's been a while since I've brushed up on my Metroid trivia, but if I remember correctly, Metroid Dread was the name of a game that was in development around the same time as Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. This game, a follow-up to Metroid Fusion, was supposed to come out around that time. I imagine it would have been for the Nintendo DS. And they even dropped hints to it. In Metroid Prime 3, there's a specific scan log that mentions Project Dread, and they were alluding like, hey, we're making Metroid Dread, right? And it was such a cool thing, but the game, for whatever reason, never came out. And so you could imagine my excitement and the excitement of other Metroid fans when we watch a Nintendo Direct one day and we get, out of nowhere, a trailer for Metroid Dread. The game, the concept at the very least, had been revived. It's now here on Nintendo Switch. And I gotta be honest, this game is fantastic. Like, this almost rivals Prime and Super for me. I'm not kidding. This game is incredible. Certainly one of the hardest games in the series, in my opinion. Mercury Steam definitely, for this and for Metroid Samus Returns, they definitely do not hold back. These are, in my opinion, some of the most difficult games in the series. But I mean, it just makes them that much cooler, you know? When you're going through those boss fights and you're having to fight tooth and nail just to stay alive, and you have all these flashy sequences, but you've also got to find, like, the boss's weak point and stuff like that. This is a fantastic game. In fact, I'm due for a replay for a lot of these games, because a lot of these games I have not played in quite some time. But man, this game is fantastic. And then you have the Emmy robots that you can kind of see all in the background there. Yeah, those guys were terrifying. My God. I don't think I've been as tense in any video game ever in my life than having to avoid an Emmy robot, much less having to fight them. My God, and it's like the most terrifying thing I think I've ever had to experience in a video game. So, absolutely incredible game. I need to play this one again soon. Now, that may be the last Metroid game, but I do have some amiibos, and I realize technically some of these would be better put in a Smash Brothers collection video, but I already showed off the Mega Man amiibo in the Mega Man video, so for the sake of consistency, we'll continue showing Smash Brothers amiibos here. Starting with the very first amiibo I ever owned, Samus from Series 1, and as you can see, she's a bit cattywampus, she's like leaning. I have had to move several times, you know, after starting my collection, And amiibos out of the box are not exactly the easiest to move. So unfortunately this Samus got damaged in one of my moves. That's why she's kind of leaning. She's supposed to be like straight. And I am very mad about it, to be perfectly honest. I'm a little upset that I let this happen, but whatever. It still works. She's still there. She hasn't like fallen off the base yet. So, and I'm too afraid to like try to snap her back to the upright position. I feel like I'm gonna break her, so I just like, you know, you're good. But yeah, the first wave of Amiibo launched November 14th, 2014, or I'm sorry, November 21st, 2014. And I remember that because that is arguably one of the best days of my life. Amiibo came out, Super Smash Bros. For Wii U came out, and Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire came out all on the same day. I spent a lot of money that day because you better believe, yes, I had this pre-ordered, I had Smash pre-ordered, and I had both Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire pre-ordered. That was a good day, let me tell you. That was a good day. But yeah, this is the first Amiibo I ever owned. I don't really do a ton with Amiibos anymore. I used to be a hardcore Amiibo collector. I still have a ton of them. But I've since slowed down on collecting Amiibos since then. And, you know, much less even using them. But, you know, to continue the Smash series, I've got Zero Suit Samus, and I've got Ridley. I actually do have an unboxing video of this Zero Suit Samus amiibo on this channel from back in the day, back in high school when I was, you know, more actively collecting amiibos and stuff like that. This is not telling you to go watch that, by the way. Some of my old content from middle school and high school is kind of cringe. If you want something to add to your cringe playlist, I guess go for it, but yeah. And then, you know, I got Ridley, you know, added as a fighter in Smash Ultimate. You know, I want to have an extensive Metroid collection, and Ridley being in Smash is kind of a big deal. Kind of a big deal, because personally, I never thought it was going to happen. But here he is, and you know what? I'm kind of glad it happened, because this amiibo is fantastic. Like, all the Smash Ultimate amiibos, so much better and so much higher quality than the Smash 4 ones, let me tell you. Of course, that's not it as far as amiibo go. The Metroid series actually has its own line of amiibos. That started with Metroid Samus Returns on 3DS, with Samus's design from that game. Very cool. I love this one. This is like one of my favorites, to be honest. And then the little Metroid, and he's squishy. He's very squishy. I love him. I love him so much. This has actually got like some heft to it. It's kind of a bulky one. But yeah, I mean, it's got the baby Metroid and the broken capsule that it came out of, and again, it's squishy. So this one caught a lot of attention online back when it released, just because it was, you know, so unique for an amiibo figure, and just really cool. One of my favorite things I remember seeing online at the time was somebody was using like this part, the broken capsule, as like a shot glass. So people were taking shots out of the Metroid amiibo. It was the funniest thing I'd ever seen at the time. Part of me has always wanted to maybe do that, but I don't have it in me to do that. It would be funny, though. And last but not least, the only sealed amiibo that I have to show you today. It is damaged, I know, just bear with me, because that box has seen better days for sure. But it is the amiibo collection for Samus and the Emmy robots from Metroid Dread. These are sealed because I just have not done anything with them yet. My philosophy as a collector is that everything comes out of the box eventually, but if I don't need it or don't want to play it immediately, then it can stay in the box, it can stay sealed. But, you know, the moment I decide I want the bonuses for whatever these amiibos give me, for whatever game, I will rip this box to shreds, because that's just how I am. But I haven't gotten there yet with these, so they are still in the box. Like I said, the box has seen better days, because like I said, I move a lot, and my most recent move was out of a tornado, so that might have something to do with it. But yeah, I mean, these are really cool, really high quality figures. I really, really love Samus's design in Dread. Kind of the white and blue of the fusion suit is just incredible. One of my favorite designs for the character. So yeah, pretty cool. But that's, yeah, that's it. I mean, that's going to do it for the Metroid collection. Like I said, you know, it was going to be a shorter video just by nature of Metroid not being a multi-platform system, which is certainly appreciated, because the length of the Mega Man video was a bit tedious to work on, but regardless of the fact, I'm happy I got to show off my Metroid collection and kind of relive some of the memories as, you know, Metroid, it holds a special spot for me as, like, being one of the first series that I branched out to thanks to the likes of Super Smash Brothers, and the series that kind of got me collecting video games and even thinking about video games. Siri went off for some reason. Where was I saying? What was I saying? Go away! Why? Anyway. Yeah, it was one of the game franchises. I'm not going to say series because... Okay, just saying. Anyway, it was one of the game franchises that really got me thinking differently about game design and got me into video game collecting. And it's a series that means a lot to me, and I'm happy I got to show it off today. So let me know what you think of my Metroid collection in the comments down below. Do you have anything cool or interesting or any fun memories about the Metroid franchise that you would like to share? Please feel free to leave it down in the comments down below, and I'll see you next month for something else. I don't know. Leave a comment. I'll take suggestions. If you want me to talk about a specific system, a specific series, anything you're curious about. As you can see, that shelf over there is quite massive, and that's not even all of it, to be perfectly honest. So if there's a part of my collection you're curious in seeing, let me know in the comments below, and I'd be happy to oblige, absolutely, because this episode was suggested via a comment. So let me know down below, and I'll see y'all next month for another video. See ya.